everyone. Very interesting session, the one we had before. And now we will be attacking a very challenging subject, the combination of urban planning and stormwater. Unfortunately, nowadays, every couple of months, we hear of a major disasters hitting somewhere, a major city around the globe. The latest one, Valencia, 200 plus death. April, Dubai, in our misfortune, we were lucky that no death toll. Before that, Germany, and the list goes on and on and on. So the question is, what's the responsibility, us as urban planner, engineers, infrastructure engineers, and can we throw always the responsibility on climate change? So this is the subject that I would like to discuss with my esteemed panelists. So here we have, 4 panelists combining urban planning background, hydrology background, and infrastructure engineering. So please, Omar, can you start introducing yourself?
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. My name is Umar Kazi. I am Director Infrastructure for AECOM, based here in UAE. My background is primarily water. I represent the infrastructure side for AECOM in our Middle East projects, as well as I am the regional water lead for AECOM. I have worked all my life primarily in the water sector, so very passionate about the water engineering.
Hello, good morning. Yes, thank you for the invite. My name is Dr. Abir Sajwani. I work with the Department of Municipalities and Transport. I'm a section head for the Policies and Environment section, and I lead both Istidama operating system program at the department, and then also very much integrated with the process of environmental planning at the department. My background is mainly environmental management and engineering, and I've worked with the realm of urban planning as well for the past maybe 10 years.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, sabah al khair. My name is Dr. Swavomir. I'm working at the Ministry of Municipality in Doha, Qatar, for 10 years now. And my background is in architecture, but I quite quickly engaged in city planning and urban design. So my daily work is mostly zoning, comprehensive, and urban planning approach to cities. And I'm very excited to be here and to listen to all of the presentations and discussions that are happening. I think this is very, very fruitful forum. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Nariba Gittins. I'm an Associate Director at WSP in the Middle East. My background is in civil and environmental engineering, and I am the hydrology lead for our water sector. I've been in the region for about 13 years now and working overall for just coming up 20. So looking forward to having our discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you all. So we opened the conversation first with our urban planner, Talbek. So how can stormwater management be effectively integrated into spatial planning? And what key challenges must be addressed, So that just to set up the background and then to open this conversation, please.
Thank you very much for this question. And also, it's a pleasure to be here as a planner. And I think it's a crucial element actually to cooperate between the industries. So a lot of learning takeaways from my side taken. The way I look at cities is from the architectural and planning perspective, because I was trained as an architect, so I see them as a kind of a living organism. And if you think about that, it's planning itself, it's a very much multi-level approach to how the cities are managed. We have the overarching strategies for countries or cities, what we want to achieve, what sort of population, how we distribute that. But also we have the general cause for why are we discussing the challenges of stormwater management, which would be the climate change. And I think at the higher level, cities can address that as well in terms of how we distribute the land uses, how we actually tackle the emissions themselves. So talking about managing the effect without discussing how you can actually mitigate the causes is something to be taken into account. So I think in our daily work as urban planners, we can deal on two levels at least. One is large-scale planning of cities, the distribution of uses, the requirements for bigger master plans, and the integration together with the infrastructure. But what is very interesting for me is actually how can you address it on the lower level, on the level of a single development, of a single plot, which could be even a single citizen. Because if you look at cities, the area for infrastructure, for road infrastructure, would be 10–15% of the city. The open spaces might be another 10 or 15, but the majority of lands actually that we are having are private lands. So how to get these developers, these owners engaged into providing solutions that would be managing stormwater or not contributing to the overflows and so on is I think, very, very crucial. And I think we can have these kind of discussions here. And also this brings us to who should be bearing the costs. Is it always the public sector, or should the private sector be engaged into that as well? So I'm looking forward to our discussions.
Thank you, Slavek. Now I turn back to Omar. Again, practically the same question, but to be addressed from the infrastructure side. So how can infrastructure help, addressing this subject, and to come up with efficient and cost-efficient solutions?
Thank you, Adel. I think I'll maybe put an engineer's perspective to this, and exactly like my fellow panelists are saying, the urban planning or master planning has evolved hugely, especially in the Middle East. I think the master plans we see now are very ambitious. They are very focused on the livability aspect, providing to the residents. But that gives us a challenge and an opportunity when it comes to infrastructure. A challenge that the space is limited, space is premium. So we always have this competing misalignment, shall I say, between urban planning and engineering, that how do we integrate the infrastructure within that ambitious master plan. But the opportunity comes from the point of view that the infrastructure can play a part in essentially satisfying the need of that master plan. So bringing the engineering side of the stormwater management, shall I say, at the early stages of the planning helps us achieve that, which allows us to be integral to that planning exercise. Not only that, from the efficiency side, from the costing side, that allows us to basically embed system into that plan, which are sustainable. We would be looking at nature-based solutions rather than more kind of engineered heavy solutions. That allows us to look for ideas like swales, roof gardens, permeable surfaces. All the sustainability aspect comes into play, and which helps drive the infrastructure, which is integral. And on the flip side is that it actually doesn't become like an afterthought, the infrastructure element, but it enhances the master plan. It actually goes very well with the master plan. And we have seen a lot of examples, especially in the region, where stormwater management or water resource management has been implemented as a feature in that plan, allowing the residents to actually enjoy that aspect of the stormwater management rather than becoming something that's nuisance.
Excellent. Now, in fact, Slavek started opening the subject about the role of the public, the private sector, and Omar, you continued on this point. So I turn to you, Abir, now, and how we can integrate the resilience in the city, and what are how we can, translate this into regulations where we get the public and private sector involved.
Yes, thank you for this. So in terms of, the coordination between the public and the private sector, I think there is huge interest for the whole community, not just the, public sector to secure and improve the infrastructure and to be more resilient. So there's quite a big interest now because the private sector needs to prove their own developments, make them more resilient towards climate change impact. And this is evident because now with many events happening across the world and specifically in this region, the models of public-private partnerships, models of private, investors trying to, finance sort of this, innovative solutions about stormwater management within the city is becoming more and more, important. So it's not just the responsibility of the public sector alone. They cannot just entirely bear the cost because such solutions usually are quite cost intensive. So they need to bear that responsibility. And I want to echo the notes that my colleague Omar here said. The solutions cannot be only hard physical infrastructure that is quite, intrusive in terms of the master plan itself. It could be nature-based solutions. It could be small solutions that are phased across the city with its critical areas where we can, based on previous, events, we can learn from our, experiences and try to replan or reprioritize areas where there is more vulnerability. Let's say, if these areas are more prone to storms and more prone to inundation, so we have to find solutions that are retrofitting these areas where we can provide concepts like the sponge city, where we can do retention ponds, do parks, and increase the infiltration, remove some of the pavements, make it permeable, look at aspects where we can, both leverage on aspects of, cooling the natural urban environment, and at the same time using, stormwater as a, let's say, a resource rather than a waste, because it helps. We have to use that somehow in the, to reduce the urban heat island effect within the urban, setting, and maybe it can be used, in terms of, aesthetic reasons as well, aesthetic views. So there's huge opportunity. There's a mind shift in towards like how we, tackle stormwater within the urban setting.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned, we live into cities already fully urbanized with lot of impervious areas. You mentioned, I would say, the magic word, how we can retrofit, and this is super expensive. Now I can come back to the infrastructure engineer with us, Omar. How can we, retrofit major mega cities in order to be more pervious and in order to be able to better absorb the water and not to generate flood?
This is a very, very specific challenge, Adel, and I'll just touch on what you said during your introduction remark, that the flooding we witness all in recent years are in very kind of urbanized places, very built. We class them in advanced cities. We witnessed this in Japan, Spain, UK, in Dubai here as well. And that provides a very specific challenge, that how do you essentially go back again into that built infrastructure and make it fit for, not just for today, but for maybe another 50 or 100 years. The rain events which happened, for example, last year in UAE or the year before, they topped 1 in 100-year scenarios, something which we have not witnessed, or we didn't probably even imagine that could happen. But it did, and I think this is a scenario, it's across many parts of the other world as well. It's a very fine balancing act that we have to try to, I think engineers as infrastructure planners have to achieve, that how do we retrofit? We can't afford to go back and do a huge amount of excavation and take everything out and put some new stuff in. So it needs to be very data-driven. Our understanding is that identifying the hotspots that are prone to such issues or problems or flooding, identifying them, and the trick is to go for minimal disruption but high impact kind of solution. So we are looking at, again, touching to what Abir was saying, that the sustainability point, sustainable solutions, implementing swales, roof gardens, looking at all the open spaces that could actually play a part in the extreme rain events. Sponge City is a very kind of a common or upcoming philosophy or a principle in its different shape or form that allows us to use the car parks or car parking plots and have permeable surfaces, but a considerable amount of storage beneath them, which also minimize disruption. The other part to that is to do this retrofit in phases. And modular construction will be a key to this. So you essentially bring off-site manufactured solutions, maximize that opportunity, bring it to the site, you install it, and then you essentially minimize the construction duration, the public impact, the road diversions, and everything that goes with it. And last thing I would like to add is that I think one of the key element to this could retrofit or the future proofing could be to incentivize the current developments or the private clients which we may have, or the residents or developers. Incentivize meaning that, for example, we have seen this very successful incentives in the automotive sector. If you buy an electric car, you pay less tax. Your car emission is low, you are incentivized. I think there is probably an opportunity here from the regulatory point of view that some incentives need to kick in, that you say if you do stormwater management better or sustainable, then there is some essentially compensation of some shape or form attached to that. I think that allows us from the future-proofing point of view to see that how we can actually not always catching up, but maybe trying to get, not maybe I would say ahead of the curve, but at least on the curve.
Thank you, Omar. You touched based on, the solution, I would say gray roof and sponge cities, and this all definitely opens the door to, nature-based solutions. And here I turn to Nariba, and can you just elaborate what kind of nature-based solutions we can implement and how can we implement them effectively or efficiently in the cities, in existing cities namely? Yeah.
No, and I think this is a great question and a great discussion so far, because I think it really presents a lot of the challenges that we face, but also a lot of the opportunities. So I think one of the main things which is really of benefit in recent years is the understanding and how nature-based solutions introduce stormwater as a resource, as an opportunity, rather than just a risk to be managed. So one of the real benefits of nature-based solutions is that ultimately stormwater management can be integrated into our urban planning. It can be integrated into our public spaces and into our amenity. I think one of the challenges we do have here in the region, though, is when we do look at how nature-based solutions have been developed. Historically, they've been developed in moderate climates. They've been developed in areas where they have a certain frequency to the rainfall, and so So as we look at applying them in this region, we also need to adapt them to this region so that we really get the most out of them without having to introduce now another demand on our water resources. Because obviously we know we are in a region where we do have a certain amount of water scarcity, even though we have the recycled water as also a resource for us to use. So I think there's a certain level of innovation now that's coming up where we are looking at increasing the perviousness and attenuation, but also adapting it from every single level of the planning. So you were talking about starting with the plot level, you know, where we are looking at opportunities to introduce, whether it's green roofs, and hopefully in the region soon we'll be seeing blue roofs, that's yet to come. But, you know, on plot attenuation being built into the not so much the facades, but the features within the plot, you know, and then building up from the plot level all the way up to the regional level. Because essentially, for stormwater to be effectively managed, it needs to be managed at every level. You know, if we just leave it just to the plot or just to the municipality and further downstream, then you have an imbalance in the way of the infrastructure that's required. Whereas if we can address it at each and every level, then one, you add value, but also you optimize and introduce a certain level of adaptability and also a certain level of resilience. Because I think the benefit of nature-based solutions as well is that they go hand in hand with our traditional systems, and particularly where we need to think of retrofitting, where we have already a fixed capacity within our system. By introducing nature-based solutions, we either can reduce the runoff that's going into these systems or introduce that level of additional capacity as we consider as well the future trends for increasing rainfall and intensity.
Thank you, Nariba. You know, now, okay, we have the solutions. Omar mentioned also the regulations and the challenge how, you know, we can push the private sector to do it through regulations, and how we can, you know, retrofit these existing cities. So I get back to you, Abir, and how can we combine all these into the regulations, how we can force it on the private, how can be a partnership between public and private to transform back our cities.
Yeah. So if I focus on the Abu Dhabi experience, we have a very much you know, robust regulatory system in terms of pushing sustainability agenda forward. So Istidama program for the Pearl rating, community rating system and the Pearl building rating systems, they have specific credits that are directed towards stormwater management, to reduce runoff, increase infiltration, and better design, green infrastructure design at the beginning, at the early design stage, because this is where you can capture most of the issues, because it will be cost effective as well, because you are implementing these solutions at the beginning where you can focus on the new developments, and this is where you can really in a green field infrastructure, rather than going to the brown field, and then cost would be increasing at that stage. So there's many other regulations that support stormwater management here in the in the Abu Dhabi municipal systems. There's old regulation that turned out to be very, very robust, actually, because it has been withstand the test of time, and it tells us something. It sends us a message that we're doing something fine at this level, but we need to increase efforts. So we have to tune our regulations to be able to respond to the new challenges of climate change, and that's something that needs further research, further, because it's a continuous science. It's a science that is evolving at the moment, and it's continuously being, shaped, and new information are being, discovered about the rates of sea level rise, about the rates of storm events that's happening. All of this needs to be translated into new regulations and new standards. And what's optimum is that we need to look at the standards that are, going to protect at least the critical infrastructure, the critical aspects, because you cannot proof the whole city. It's impossible. So this is where you need the private sector to come in with their vision of managing their own infrastructure, their own assets, and then filling that gap, because you can only reach up to a level that is with the publicly owned assets, and then you would rely on the private sector to continue that effort and fill in that gap. So they have that interest. They would support by understanding the cost of inaction. They would be able to understand the economic feasibility of applying these solutions. So, if you by logic, if you introduce some parks here and there and some nature-based solutions within your master plan, you would avoid this much cost of complete, storm event inundation level filling your master plan. So it's like it's the cost or benefit analysis that you would pay on this, upfront cost, but then you would understand the implication of the cost of inaction, and then you would try forward. So basically, I would say that the vision of working only with standards and regulation is limited, because you need the implementation part to take in further, and you need, let's say, the private sector to join in forces with the public sector to provide a robust solution for climate change effects and for stormwater management within the city.
Moving back to climate change effect, here I have a specific question. The private sector can be driven by civism, but it has up to certain limitations, but mainly can be driven by the carrot and the stick. So I don't know, Abir or Salvik, would you like to address this point on what Omar has mentioned in terms of the taxes, whether we give incentives or we impose more taxes? Are there any examples either from Abu Dhabi or Qatar that can, give us this?
Yes, thank you. I think it's a very interesting discussion, and also I'm happy that we got to the plot level in a way, because it's something I feel about. But also I'm thinking it's something making huge impact in terms of how these private developments are done. And when we think about private development in cities, as planners, we usually think about the big ones, right, the visible ones. But actually the numbers are within the small individual citizens that have their own plots. And as planners, we can actually affect them in terms of what kind of regulations we provide for them, or what kind of requirements are within these regulations. And even starting from a covered area, which is very important for every owner, how much of my plot can I cover with the building? Sometimes I feel we forget about the rest of the plot, what actually they would be doing. And as a solution here locally, very easy for these owners and cheap is just to cover it with interlock. So actually they're just misusing this area because they either are not forced or not aware of other solutions, such as permeable surfaces, or using other, for example, crushed rocks to cover the sand that actually permeable, not the interlock itself. So these kind of solutions can happen on a plot level, and I'm even thinking the typologies of houses being single-family houses that have setbacks around versus the traditional Arabic houses, which are having a courtyard which can be used for the house, but also can have landscaping, can be able to store this water for a moment in such an event. This is also another solution that we might be thinking about. And basically, I really appreciate the comment about understanding the magnitude of inaction by individuals, because I think we can talk a lot at strategic levels, but educating and this kind of bottom-up approach is something that we really should should focus on. I'm looking at the younger generation of our children. I see they are talking about climate change naturally, about what they can do in their daily lives. So I think it's the same thing that an owner or a developer doesn't feel it as a burden, but I'm contributing to something. And speaking of the green roofs, and as an example, there is recently implemented in Doha a regulatory incentive that gives additional GFA on the rooftop when the rooftop is green. And it's taken on, but I also feel it takes time for the people to understand that this is actually a solution that they can do. So all these elements can be embedded into the planning system, and I think it's a matter of collaboration between the private and the public, just as you mentioned.
Anything at the horizon regarding taxes? You know, whether cutting taxes on new permits, for instance, you know, because this is actually where the stick and the carrot come in, you know.
Yes, I think depending on cities in the world, there are different ways. If you either incentivize with tax reduction, or there is maybe a financial scheme that allows you to borrow money at a lower cost, some technical assistance, because the thing is, many of these solutions are new, so people might not be aware how they can apply it. So if the municipality would be able to help with the design or the know-how, I think this is also another way of incentivizing.
We mentioned earlier the climate change, and now, okay, we go back to the climate change and how we can readapt our cities to increasing rain events. Omar, you mentioned, you know, in fact, the event that hit Dubai or the Emirates last April, as per our, in fact, numbers, we tried to refit the rain event on our intensity, duration, frequency curve, and it came slightly above the 1 in 500 years. So again, in fact, yes, these kind of events can happen, and we have to be prepared. Is it the responsibility of climate change? And how can we retransform our cities to minimize the damages and especially reduce and eliminate the potential fatalities? I reiterate, here we were blessed with all the, you know, miserable event that hit us, that there was no fatalities. However, in Europe, we have hundreds of deaths in Jeddah and so on. So this is a very critical topic, how we can reshape our cities to cope with the climate change.
No. So it is really a very critical topic indeed, because I think it actually requires a shift in mindset as well in the way we approach stormwater management. Now, I prefer to use the term management rather than engineering, because I think it embodies more than just the physical solutions as well. So the physical solutions are one aspect of how we manage stormwater. As we mentioned, we often have now fixed size infrastructure, which we can't go back and increase the size of. So we actually need to think of different ways, one, in terms of approaching the problem when we're planning, when we're designing, but also in how we respond to the problem. So first, I would say on the planning and designing side, we have to think more now in terms of designing for exceedance and what happens with the residual risk. So obviously, we have the focus that we must design for a fixed return period or a fixed return rainfall interval, because we have to balance the cost against the benefit of having the infrastructure, and we can't just build more and more and find more and more space. So when we come to that limit, we have to think, well, what happens with the residual risk? How is that effectively managed? How can I design and consider that exceedance? As I mentioned before, you know, there is a role for the nature-based solutions in adding that additional capacity. And I think it's a lot easier, obviously, with the greenfield sites, because when you look at a greenfield site, we can work with the planners, the road designers, the landscapers, and create effectively a site that allows for us to direct the rainwater so that we can make space for it within our plans. So whether that's a beautiful park that then doubles as an attenuation basin, or a playing field that gets closed for a couple of days. So it gives us, we have that greater flexibility. Obviously, this becomes more challenging when we have then retrofitting areas which are completely congested, completely impervious. So then we need to then start to think more as well about adaptability and also response. So when that rain falls, how can we actually now start to introduce maybe more digital solutions to address the problems, whether that's maybe a hydraulic gate that goes up so that you protect a property, but then allow your roads to flood, and then maybe then also having the monitoring, so maybe your critical zones of flooding, that you actually close those off for temporary stormwater storage. So it's about coming up with some of these more creative solutions, introducing now the technology to actually create then a way to manage the stormwater above and beyond your infrastructure. And then this also helps us with the response, because then when we then integrate that with our emergency responses, we can then communicate that with the general public. We can start to educate, and it becomes then a much more sustainable way to approach. Because we all know with the proliferation of climate change, we're going to have the increase in intensity, we're going to have increasing frequency, and so we do need to be proactive and not just reactive in the way we manage. We know that we will see flooding. It's going to happen, and we can't avoid it. There's no way that you can build around it. So it is, I think, about a solution that embodies the private sector in terms of the development, the planning, but also the public sector, but more so not only in terms of policies, but also in the response and the actual overall management of the solutions.
You touched base on numerous items about, the predictability of the event, how we can use, the weather forecasting in order to, address this, the problem. This is from one side. This will not eliminate it. However, it can minimize eventually the losses, okay? So, for instance, if we can allocate the ground floor, okay, for certain activities where we don't put critical assets. And now I go back to the topic of critical assets. This would be an item that can be considered for retrofitting. So, is there any, for instance, wherever you work, either Klavek or Abir, any revisiting the master plan, identifying what are the critical assets that should never be, I would say, affected, eventually put them at a higher elevation, use the ground floor for, I would say, less critical land use. And this is one dimension of how we can address the problem, because definitely we cannot move the city out of the floodplain anymore. At one point, we took a decision to establish the city, so now eventually how we can still use the area, but in a eventually dynamic way. Is there any trend, whether, who would like to take this question?
Okay, so I can start. There's a number of studies that can be used to support us in terms of science evolving towards how much we should elevate our infrastructure or the buildings. But if it is already established, this is where it's the critical line. But if it is like a new field, then greenfield, we can the recommendation that we have here in DMT is that we build across 3.6 above, the finished floor level. It should be 3.6 at, finished floor level of the development. So this is not so much, let's say, conservative, but it's like, it's in between the, let's say, moderate between the cost and the accommodating science towards like how much we should elevate. But then in terms of land users now, critical assets, I would say that the critical, let's say, infrastructure that are important for running the city, like power plants, plants, like hospitals, like schools, and all of this, and all of the important community facilities that are critical for people's, functioning and health and survival in that situation. So what we need to do is that prove these critical infrastructure first by finding solutions towards one of the innovative solutions that you mentioned is that the ground level for the buildings can be evacuated and then worked at the M level and above. This is one of the solutions that can be done. However, needs to be very much considerate of what's available in the ground floor and how much we can, approve that area. Like, for example, if there's generators, if there's assets that needs to be, run for the for the management of the building itself. So this is very important as well. So should be carefully planned before we run new regulations, new standards, where we have to make sure that the current infrastructure or the current buildings can manage with the the solution, the innovative solution. It's just work with what you have and then maybe create solutions around let's say reducing the stormwater within the area, diverting it to close by areas, retention ponds, and so forth. So this is one of the things that you can work towards, but again, because retrofitting is quite difficult for the limitation of space, you have to be very innovative in this.
You'd like to add anything
just
about this?
Because it's a very interesting discussion actually, and as a city planner, right, and being excited about cities, we cannot move the cities, right? I really liked your comment. We cannot say it won't be flooded. It will be. It's just something we need to accept in a way and just work with it. In terms of uses, of course, the ideal planning would be to start, years back and move the whole cities into better areas or so. But we cannot do that. The retrofitting part is actually the most difficult all the time, and I think understanding the magnitude of what might be happening as the future events come. I think in the examples that Abir mentioned, for example, Hafen City in Germany, they were actually building higher from the scratch because they were expecting flooding, but that was some years back, and now we will see how it's going to move forward. So I think it's a very difficult but also very important idea, and I think not only from the plot level but from the city functioning level of having a critical, especially like hospitals, power plants, and good locations, or then providing the infrastructural solutions to save them in such situations.
Would you like to add anything on this point before we still have maybe 3 minutes? Any final short comment on this before we take one question from the audience eventually?
Sure. I think one of the things, as all the panelists have also been mentioning, is about being creative with our solutions. One of the things I was thinking about as people were speaking was back to the UK, for example. Whenever a river broke its banks, the solution was sandbags. You get the sandbags out and you just pile them up, right? And we often think about that being applicable only to rivers or, river-type solutions. But in the urban setting now, where we do have, say, these critical spots where you do get the, major ponding, then we have to come up with solutions where we protect that critical infrastructure that we can't elevate. I know there's suppliers who develop, those automated hydraulic gates, which I absolutely love because they're flat, you drive over them, it's your driveway, water comes and they automatically start to rise. And I think solutions like that are the ones that we need to start applying, integrating. We're fortunate that there are many areas within our cities that are walled, so solutions such as that are easier to implement. But obviously it's not applicable for every single situation. But I think it's those kind of solutions which aren't necessarily about building capacity, but are about protection. How do we introduce something that says, okay, we are going to have water over land, but how can we keep it away from something that's critical and force its direction to somewhere that's not, where it can then be managed, it can then be, dealt with. So I think, though, it is a situation of us working together. You know, it's not a solution that even I think just us as engineers and planners here could resolve. I think it does employ quite a few more persons within this overall role. As I said, it's stormwater management. You know, we have to go away from the idea of just stormwater engineering. It has to be stormwater management. As I said, we have to build adaptability into our cities. And yeah, start with the critical, but then you know, once we are more confident with the solutions, then we start to roll it out. And as I mentioned, even with the nature-based solutions, we have a situation here that's somewhat unique because we're not like the moderate climates with the frequent rainfall. So we need to pick and choose from others, you know, those ones that are most applicable, most beneficial for us. Sometimes they are the hard engineering solutions, but if it's something like that hydraulic gate, you know, I think that's fabulous. So, you know, I think going forward, though, it's a conversation that we have to continue. It's something that needs to, you know, be thought of, be innovated. As I said, think more about the role of the digital solutions in that as well. How can that play a part as well to create maybe something that's more operable rather than just a static infrastructure solution? So.
In fact, this is a fantastic subject. Personally, I'm very passionate about it, about how we can combine the water and in the city. I can take one single question from the audience. Dr. Muhammad, please, and because we are running out of time. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Aboujaoude and the panelists for this important sessions. Actually, it's not questions, it's comment and maybe recommendation regarding our lesson learned from Saudi Arabia. Now we are know how any city can deal under the rain event, whatever the rain event intensity, we can know this with the modeling, whatever, digital twin and blah, blah, blah. The problem is we don't know when the rain can happen. But we know how the city can act under different rain. We can do this one. The most problem which you are facing in our cities, it's the integration between the urban planning and the stormwater master plan. We're going to urban planning in absence of the stormwater solutions. And unfortunately, the stormwater is different than other infrastructures. I can put water pipe in a way, I can make sewage line in a way, but the solution for the stormwater for the main cities, especially the main trunk for the stormwater, it's always have their own way. The water knows their own way, the water flow path, it's the way to put your solution for the storm. If you try to shift this in another place, this will be costly, have a lot of action to do, and always done their proper actions. So I recommend to have the master plan solution for the city before going to make any urban planning for the city. Urban planning should be going with a master plan for the city. If you know the master plan for the storm, so you know the current condition, the future conditions, the future solutions, go and make your urban planning as you want. Now, most of our problem in Saudi Arabia, for many areas, the main wadi is now going to the urban planning, and you're going now to try to shift and clear this wadi because this is the only part of the water. And you have to pay billions of SAR for the land acquisition for this. So for the stormwater management in the city level, should the city have a master plan before approve any planning for the stormwater? Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad. In fact, just to conclude on this point, in fact, it's not enough just to have the master plan, but just to respect the master plan, because the majority of the cities have master plans established when, long time ago, and years after years, the master plan is forgotten, and we start invading the flood plain, and this is where the dramatic situations happen. We can have hundreds of examples around the globe. So with this, I have to conclude this session. Really exciting and nice dynamic conversation. Thank you, our dear panelists. Thank you for your audience.